There are reports from people describing the transition to the other side as a moment of peace and relief, almost like waking up from a deep sleep. But is it really that simple? Today, we have the chance to explore an approach that could completely change the way we perceive life and death. The main figure behind these ideas is Edgar Cayce, known for bringing spiritual revelations that have inspired scholars and curious minds for decades. He made contributions that go way beyond just information, touching on deep aspects of consciousness, reincarnation, and the purpose of each individual. Sticking around until the end of this content might open up pathways of understanding that illuminate not just questions about the fate of the soul, but also how every moment of earthly existence can become richer and more meaningful. It's common to wake up in the morning barely noticing our own breath or the simple fact that we're alive. We rarely take a moment to reflect on whether what we call the self might just transition to another dimension at some point. According to the revelations attributed to Edgar Cayce, this moment of transition isn't just a blackout or a brief lapse. There's the idea that as soon as the physical body reaches its limit, the soul feels, first and foremost, liberated from any pain or burden. Many describe this sensation as a deep relief, almost like taking off a tight outfit after a long day. This initial moment would be marked by a clear realization that reality keeps moving forward, just in a different frequency than we're used to. Even people who live busy lives filled with obligations, stress, and commitments might, on some level, sense that there's something more beyond the simple act of existing biologically. And at that moment of passing into another realm, everything starts to become clear. Some say that this state of relief works like an inner revelation. Imagine spending a whole life feeling pains, worries, or even an exhaustion that seems endless. Suddenly, all of that disappears. This perspective offers a lighter understanding of the end, a view that isn't necessarily tied to fear, but rather to a reunion with a more subtle part of ourselves. Some spiritual traditions even compare this moment to waking up from a dream filled with tension. If we realize that this transition is just the beginning of a larger process, we can radically change the way we live right now, because the certainty that there is something beyond brings a new responsibility regarding our actions, words, and intentions in everyday life. Even though many describe this first experience as liberating, Edgar Cayce points out that consciousness doesn't fade away. Instead, it seems to expand. What was limited to physical experience gains a much broader perspective. In this phase, the soul gets a chance to review what it has lived, as if watching scenes from the past play out at a different speed with surprising details. And not just from its own perspective, but also from the viewpoints of the people it crossed paths with along the way. Imagine situations where, impulsively, you say something that hurts someone or commit an injustice without even realizing it. According to these revelations, the moment comes to feel what it was like to be in the other person's shoes and understand the weight or lightness of each choice. A lot of people imagine a judgment filled with condemnation, but in the accounts attributed to Cayce, it feels more like a deep process of inner evaluation. It's as if every detail of earthly life is shown not to punish, but to teach. When viewing life through the eyes of those we have affected, empathy grows, and we become aware that every action triggers a chain reaction. For those dealing with guilt, regrets, or even remorse that pops up in daily moments, this perspective can serve as encouragement to act with more empathy now, because in the end, nothing is lost in the records of one's own consciousness. At the moment this transition happens, another point comes into play: the help of spiritual guides or mentors. Many people share near-death experiences that include encounters with enlightened beings or dear friends who passed before, as well as presences that aren't necessarily recognized as family. These guides would have the role of welcoming, guiding, and preparing the soul for the next stages. According to interpretations of Edgar Cayce, these entities aren't distant or inaccessible figures. Instead, they are protectors who have been walking alongside us since before the final departure. After all, how many times in daily episodes haven't you felt a strong intuition that prevented a worse situation or led you to a wiser choice? Many spiritual traditions attribute these intuitive nudges to the presences that guide us. At the moment of death, this becomes even more evident, as the barrier of the physical disappears, allowing for direct and comforting contact. That idea of absolute solitude dissolves when we realize that stepping out of the body doesn't leave us drifting in the void. There's support, warmth, and the feeling that firm steps can still be taken even outside the material plane. When discussing the notion of heaven and hell, there's a lot of talk about places with golden gates or cauldrons of fire. However, Edgar Cayce offers a different interpretation. These environments wouldn't be physical, but rather states of consciousness. In other words, heaven can be experienced when the soul vibrates in harmony, cultivating love, compassion, and integrity. Hell, on the other hand, would manifest when consciousness is trapped in harmful or heavy feelings like hate, envy, or bitterness. It's interesting to note how, even in our daily lives, every choice we make can bring us closer to one of these states. By saying a kind word or helping someone with no ulterior motives, it's as if we're tuning into a higher frequency, creating an atmosphere that resembles an inner heaven. On the flip side, when we feed jealousy, anger, or prolonged resentment, we dive into a gloomy atmosphere that can be compared to a little personal hell. Facing this perspective, it becomes clear that paradise or torment is less about a where and more about a how we are vibrating. What if the learning of life doesn't end with just this one existence? For Edgar Cayce, reincarnation is one of the most direct mechanisms for the soul's evolution. According to this line of thought, each life is a continuation of the spiritual development that began in other times. Choices, challenges, relationships, and even personality tendencies can be linked to past existences. This idea suggests that instead of everything starting and ending in one single journey, there's a sequence of chapters where the soul refines its qualities and tries to correct or make up for past mistakes. In a practical context, when we experience that feeling of déjà vu or instantly connect with certain people, we can raise the hypothesis that we've shared stories in other opportunities. It's worth remembering that none of this has to be taken in a rigid or deterministic way. The central message is that there's always the possibility for change, growth, and overcoming old patterns. If this topic sparks your curiosity and makes sense, it might be interesting to keep exploring content that develops this subject further, because there's so much to discover about the dynamics of multiple lives and the purposes that cross over time. Another intriguing point in the teachings attributed to Edgar Cayce is the concept of Akashic records. It's like a subtle file where every emotion, every decision, and every event is recorded. It may sound a bit like a huge book that contains all the individual and collective stories of humanity. According to this perspective, it's where the spiritual script is found, allowing the soul to understand its past experiences and plan for what's next. In everyday moments, we might find ourselves reliving intense emotions for no apparent reason or having a clear impression of something, almost like an ancient memory. Some believe that this could be a glimpse into accessing those records, a memory that surfaces to reveal a specific lesson or to unlock some dormant understanding. It's not something that can be proven in traditional labs, but for many, it makes sense that everything we think, feel, or do leaves its mark on some level. In this sense, understanding this universal file can help us navigate the nuances of our own history, bringing more clarity to the present moment and the path we wish to build. In this context, the concept of returning to the source arises as the final synthesis of the whole process. After living, dying, learning, reincarnating, and leaving impressions in the Akashic records, the time would come to go back home. But what would this home be? Cayce describes the idea of a reintegration into the universal whole, a state where individuality isn't lost, but aligns with something much greater than any human description. It's like going back to the origin of everything, keeping what was built through experiences, yet feeling an indescribable unity. For many, this concept brings comfort and awakens a sense of belonging that contrasts with the loneliness many of us might feel at times. Imagining that, even in death, the essence remains, and at some point there's a reunion with the entirety, makes life take on a meaning that transcends the day-to-day. We become more inclined to rethink our actions, seek the good of everyone, and respect ourselves and others, since ultimately, all fragmentation comes back to unite with a common source. Many questions often arise after reflecting on these topics. After all, death is still one of the biggest mysteries surrounding the human experience. Some people are afraid, others feel genuine curiosity, and some would rather not think about it. However, realizing that there's a spiritual perspective with rich layers of detail, whether it's the immediate transition upon leaving the body, the process of reviewing actions, interacting with guides, understanding heaven and hell as states of consciousness, reincarnation, the Akashic records, or the idea of returning to the source, can inspire us to live more consciously. Maybe the routine presents many tasks and problems, but knowing that every action is recorded and that love and compassion are gateways to higher states of being can help us make wiser choices. Of course, everyone will absorb these ideas differently, whether through questioning, faith, or curiosity. This topic often sparks lively conversations and diverse viewpoints. It's definitely worth taking the time to reflect, see how it fits or doesn't with personal beliefs, and find what makes sense. If the discussion sparked any insights or raised further questions, sharing your opinion and continuing the debate can be valuable. In many cases, reading what others think or feel about this topic brings light to aspects we might not notice alone. For those who enjoy content that touches on spiritual themes, I suggest keeping the channel on your radar, as there are always intriguing new topics to discover. It's possible that one ordinary day, while having coffee or going to work, that spark will connect the reflections of now with something we've experienced in daily life. Each decision, encounter, and challenge can be viewed in light of these ideas, transforming everyday life into a lab for growth. Before wrapping up, let's revisit the main thread of everything that's been said. According to the views associated with Edgar Cayce, death doesn't represent an end, but a new beginning in another realm. The initial relief, the reflection and review of actions, the contact with guides, the understanding that heaven and hell are internal states, the opportunity for reincarnation to continue learning, the Akashic records that capture all our experiences, and the final return to the source intertwine and give meaning to our journey. This perspective can inspire us to act more compassionately and authentically while we're still here. Who knows, maybe that's exactly what makes earthly life so special, the chance to grow, love, correct mistakes, and leave a positive mark on a story that continues even after we're gone. If you have any questions or feel like expressing a viewpoint, the comments section is open for everyone. Discreetly, you can ensure that anyone interested in these topics receives notifications about new materials. Just subscribe to the channel and activate notifications if you feel comfortable. The idea is to maintain the harmony of this space, sharing experiences and reflections that can lead to mutual growth. After all, we're all, on some level, seeking answers to what seems bigger than words can describe. The passage through life is inevitably marked by the finiteness of the body, but the hope is that this end is really a portal that, according to the perspectives presented, opens consciousness to much vaster realities. While we're here, every choice matters, every gesture counts, and every pursuit of understanding deepens the meaning of living. Finding a balance between daily responsibilities and the perception of being part of something greater may be the big challenge that gives color and intensity to our time on Earth. It's heartfelt to think that at the moment when the physical phase reaches its limit, there will come a moment to review our personal histories in a way that might not be possible now, expanding consciousness and sensitivity to unimaginable levels. In this sense, paying attention to what Edgar Cayce says can open doors for those who want to go beyond fear and view death as an essential transition toward fuller dimensions of being. This reflection serves as a reminder that living isn't just about waking up every day and ticking off tasks, but also about transforming every action into a seed that will blossom at some point in time, whether in this life or in others. If the idea of continuity and constant learning resonates, then everything that happens here is worth experiencing with attention, respect, and generosity. And if this content made you think about some detail of your life or awakened curiosity about what might come next, sharing your thoughts can be a way to connect with others who are also on this quest. This way, new perceptions can emerge, bringing even more clarity regarding each person's role in the bigger picture. If you feel like following more topics like this, feel free to subscribe and leave a comment describing the feelings or reflections that came up. In the end, I suggest that whenever there's a moment of tranquility, you allow yourself to dive inward to evaluate how each choice of the day aligns or not with the purpose you believe you have. Maybe this exercise helps ease certain fears and anxieties, reminding you that on the other side, there's a process of welcoming, reflection, and even greater growth. Let's face it, thinking about death may not be so gloomy if we understand it as part of a much larger storyline, where each act, each kindness, each mistake, and each lesson resonate in eternity. This way, living stops being just a tiring routine and becomes a sacred opportunity for ongoing evolution.